Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us again this week. Well, last week when we met, I did talk to you about several things, and one of the things I talked to you about was Guyana's relationship with somewhat the international world. And I did promise you that on today's program, it would be my pleasure to have the U.S. Ambassador to Guyana. Of course, that is His Excellency Perry Holloway. He's here on the program, and it really is my pleasure to welcome him to the program. Welcome to you, sir, and thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. This is the first time I've been on TV in Guyana, at least in a formal fashion, and I'm very happy to be here for the show. I'm also, along with my wife, Rosaura, very happy to be in Guyana.
Okay, wonderful, sir. Thank you very much for that. Also coming up a little later on today's program, I did promise you last week also we'll be speaking with the recently appointed minister within the Ministry of Communities. Of course, that's Mrs. Valerie Sharp Patterson. She's here to talk to you. I know there's been much buzz recently about the availability of land and so on. She'll clear up all of the issues and the questions you may have, even though I'm not opening up the phone lines on this program either, as I did tell you in previous programs that we will eventually return to the phone lines. But for now, let's focus on Guyana's relationship with the U.S. Ambassador. And well, not only the U.S. Ambassador, but the U.S. in general. Sir, recently you had a courtesy call. You paid a courtesy call on the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. And viewers, I must remind you, this is not the only courtesy call he's paid. The ambassador has also been meeting with some of our other government officials, ministers, and so on. But one of the things that you discussed with the president was the relationship that the U.S. shares with Guyana, and you were even quoted in sections of the media as saying that that relationship right now is fantastic. What do you mean by fantastic?
Well, it is exactly what I meant. It is a fantastic relationship between the two countries. Every country, of course, has its own national interest, and so there will be times where we may or may not agree 100% on every single issue, but we have a lot of concurrence in many of the issues we're working on. We have very close cooperation on international crime and counter-narcotics. I would say that cooperation began very closely under the Ramsey administration, has continued under President Granger's efforts, and we look forward to get even stronger. We've been working a lot on the oil and energy sector. We are also got a lot of shared programs and interest on anti-corruption and transparency sort of issues and programs with the government. And we've always had a shared commitment, as does the current government, to democratic values, human rights, and good governance. So I guess the last thing that makes our relations fantastic is something that we share that's very close to both the United States and Guyana, is the Guyanese diaspora in the United States. It's very hard to get your hands on actual statistics, but there are some estimates that there could be more Guyanese in the United States than there are in Guyana. There's certainly in the New York, New Jersey area alone, there's close to maybe 400,000 Guyanese. So the diaspora is part of the United States, but it also has very close ties to Guyana. So that is a force that binds us together and makes, I think, both countries better as a result.
Okay. In talking about that, the collaboration in sense, people going to the U.S. and then people coming here from the U.S., there is always an issue for us here in Guyana. Not only in Guyana, this is in the Caribbean in general when it comes to crime. Let's talk about the U.S.'s contributions to Guyana as far as we will accept in terms of helping us to fight crime.
Well, we are doing a lot of help to fight crime. A lot of it's done through our Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, and some of the projects are even run through CARICOM, different committees of CARICOM. Yes. Just yesterday, I was at the Police Officers Training Center, and we donated a large amount, about $25,000 U.S. of what's video training equipment. And what this equipment allows Guyana to now do is there are going to be 15 different training centers throughout the CARICOM community, essentially. And now Guyanese police can take a course at a course in Dominica or at a course in Grenada virtually. In other words, they don't have to pay the expensive plane ticket, all the hotels, and the per diem. We are linking all of these police training academies together via the internet. Now that the internet has gotten very powerful, it's a secure communication. Guyana will also be able to share its courses with other countries. So that's a most recent example. The DEA office, we've had DEA officials coming here and working for years, actually, but they've never been permanently assigned and living in Guyana. I had at one point said we had hoped to have them open in January. It slipped to February. It will not slip any later than February. So in February, we're going to be cutting the ribbon on the DEA office. Once the DEA gets here, the most important thing the DEA provides, they're focusing on cases that have a U.S. connection. Guyana to U.S. connection or vice versa. They will be able to share a lot more information with the government of Guyana and the CANU and the police regarding narco trafficking and international crime. Right now, we do share information when it's appropriate and when we can. But when we have people actually assigned here on the ground, they form these relations. You may have seen in December with Minister Ramsey, we signed an agreement for a vetted unit. This is a small group of people who will work very closely with DEA. So it's going to lead to a lot more information sharing. Now, there is no silver bullet against narco trafficking or international crime. These guys are very smart, very well financed, and don't have any scruples or morals at all. So it's a very formidable foe out there. But by working together and sharing information, we're going to be able to do a lot more with Guyana in that respect.
Okay. In saying that, though, will extra efforts be placed into fighting it locally? Because you did explain about transnational crime and so on.
Right.
Anything specifically for
Well,
local?
I mean, a lot of the, let's talk about narcotics, then I'll talk about some of the other
Sure.
programs. But the narcotics, of course, like I said, DEA only comes to look for U.S. links. But whenever they're getting information from sources and everything, they often get information that has nothing to do with a crime that could occur in the U.S., but it has to do with something going on here. So they will be able to share that information with Guyana's police.
Yeah.
So, but remember, DEA is not, they're not policemen here. They are law enforcement attachés. So they are not going to be kicking down doors. They're not going to be arresting people. They don't have any of those powers. They're just going to be providing information and advice. But I think you'll find, and it doesn't happen overnight, but over a period of months, and especially a year or so, I think the ability for Guyana to deal with not only the transnational narcotics trafficking, but local narcotics trafficking will increase as a result. As far as helping more localized crime, we have a series of trainings we do throughout the year, both on crime scene management, evidence handling, professionalization, human rights. It's a constant sort of training thing that we do with the Guyanese police, and sometimes even with officials from the GRA and CANU and others. And we're always providing equipment. I think one of our focuses this year is we want to work a little bit on the ability to do a little more ballistics analysis and stuff to be able to solve crimes based on actual evidentiary stuff. So I think we look forward to doing that. And so it's never a dull moment, and we can certainly provide you greater information about different projects we have. But we probably spend close to $1 million a year on trainings and projects and stuff here that all goes towards local. Even the training, virtual training I talked about, obviously other countries have trainings that are devoted more to street crime or local crime. So now the Guyanese police, as a result of this equipment and this connection we've made for them, will be able to get specialized training from other nations like Jamaica maybe, which has particular expertise in a certain type of street crime or something. So it is a constant battle, and it's a business where it's regularly 3 steps forward and 2 steps backward.
Backward, yeah.
But luckily, I think things are moving in the right direction.
Let's talk about the receptive aspect of it. You did talk about the fact that, and I did also mention it, the fact that you've met not only with the president, but other officials and other ministers and so on. Do you sense that there is a 100% willingness to institute changes, not only with crime? In this case, I can also pull in climate change. Do you get that sense?
I do get the sense. I think that I've met with all but 2 ministers, and the other I'm meeting with those 2 in the coming weeks. I'm not going to tell you who. And the fact that I haven't met with them has nothing to do with their importance or not. It's just a matter of schedules, and there's only so many hours in a day. And every minister I've talked to seems very well prepared and very committed to the problems and challenges that face the country. Again, I think it's in government there's lots of obstacles and challenges. So I think some things might be a little more difficult than people realized, and that's just the way it is. But every person I've met with seems fully committed. Everything we've wanted to. They've asked us to work with them on. We have tried to do so, and everything we've asked that we thought was of mutual interest, they've been very receptive, and so I don't have any complaints on that front.
Wonderful.
It would be nice if we all had more money, both the government of Guyana and the U.S. government, to apply here, but we don't. But we're going to continue to keep fighting the fight.
All right. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, this is Facing the Nation. Today, it is my pleasure to be chatting with the U.S. Ambassador to Guyana, His Excellency Perry Holloway, and of course, our conversation continue.
I realized you asked about climate change. I didn't really.
Yes, I was going to bring it back, but
Okay.
I realized it's okay. Go
I
ahead.
mean,
Sir.
Guyana's had for a number of years, even before this administration, a sort of carbon neutral project out there, close collaboration with Norway and others. We fully support that. We commend the efforts that have occurred. I think the Norwegian ambassador is visiting Guyana in a week or two, and I'm going to be seeing him and seeing if there's ways that the U.S. government can contribute in our own small way. We do have some efforts through regional programs in the Caribbean to work on climate change mitigation. So in other words, the negative effects of climate change, how can a country prepare for it? And it's my hope in the coming year or two that we'll be able to generate more interest, not only from Washington, but the international community, on sort of forestry management and preservation of forest and rainforest and jungle and stuff like that. We've been doing very little on that, but I'm hoping that will change in the future. But I think Guyana's efforts at Paris, I think their interventions at Paris were well received. Everyone thinks there is a strong commitment in Guyana. It has a good reputation, again, going back even to the previous administration on climate change activities and issues. So I think that bodes well for a country that's actually one of the best preserved countries left on the world today. So I hope that Guyanese recognize what they have here and that the international community helps as well. The other thing that you also asked about change, and I sent you another important change that we saw in the last few months was the passage of the Anti-Money Laundering Counterterrorism Finance.
Yes.
That was legislation that the international community obviously was seeking, but it was also really necessary for Guyana to be able to continue to be part of the world banking community and the world economy. Without such legislation, it would be really impossible for Guyanese banks to deal with other banks. So that we were very happy to see that change, and obviously that was a commitment of various people, not any one individual.
All right, and that point brings me to foreign investment. One of the things the current government of Guyana is adamant about is the fact that we need foreign investment here in order to develop at a rapid rate. From what you've seen, are we in a position or a state whereby foreign investment should be, not only should be encouraged, but what sort of position we're in terms of promoting and accepting it?
Well, certainly there's no doubt that it is true that in order for a country to develop, a developing country, a small economy like Guyana, to develop at a fairly rapid rate, they definitely need foreign direct investment. There's not enough internal capital within the country to really promote rapid investment, and there's a very small market, so the only way you're going to probably have sustained economic, significant growth is you're going to have some foreign direct investment. Now, in what sectors and how much, we could have a debate on that. I was saying, as I think I mentioned earlier, I'd been in confirmation purgatory 14 months in Washington, waiting to come here while the U.S. Senate deliberated whether they should send me or not. And I read almost everything on Guyana there is to read. I don't remember it all, unfortunately, because I'm now over the age of 50 and my memory is not what it used to be. But one of the things that struck me is literally from the time of the Dutch, moving forward to independence and now today, is the potential of Guyana. It's always been about the potential. I hope and I believe that Guyana is now on the cusp of hopefully beginning to realize in a significant fashion some of the potential. And I think that's only going to pay large benefits for the people of Guyana. You've got significant oil discovery that everyone knows about by ExxonMobil off the coast, which in some years when they begin to actually produce, that's going to create significant revenue for the country. I know that the United States government and many other governments are working with the government of Guyana to try to create a regulatory environment that's both transparent and accountable, and a sort of budget planning and also a sovereign wealth fund concept, so that Guyana will be able to best use those funds in a way that is productive and positive for the people of Guyana. So, but when you're talking about investing in a country, when U.S. companies come and they say, should we invest here or not? I mean, one of the challenges is it's a very small market. So that's one of so companies wanting to come and export things here, it's not incredibly attractive, though for small and medium-sized enterprises, there is a market here for that. But it's all about the risk and the reward. So in a developing country, still with some infrastructure challenges, there's a little more risk. So the companies, if I'm going to take on more risk as a businessman, I want more reward.
Yes.
And so that's the balancing act, when the government negotiates with companies or when Guyanese companies negotiate with foreign companies. There's always the one company's looking for less risk or more reward, and the other's looking for the opposite. But but we have seen, I think, in the last year or two, much greater interest in Guyana on behalf of U.S. companies. I think also other companies. I think, from what I've heard from my colleagues at the British and Canadian embassies and the EU, there's greater interest in Guyana. So I do think it is a place to be investing, but one has to recognize the risk and recognize the reward or lack thereof if you miscalculate on the risk.
As we move forward in terms of investment, recently reports in the media have indicated that you have, in a sense, expressed an interest in some of what is dear to us, especially the fact that this is our Jubilee year.
Yeah.
And I think some of what you would like to do falls under the Fund for Cultural Preservation. It's the U.S. Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation, and one of the things you were talking about recently is our lighthouse. Let's talk about not only the lighthouse, but everything that can possibly fall under this fund.
Well, this is a fund that's out of Washington, and our 170 so embassies in the world, our ambassadors, can apply for projects that should be culturally preserved, that are of historic and cultural significance to a country, and it's not a gigantic fund, so we're not talking multi-million-dollar projects. Mm-hmm. So I did visit the lighthouse. I successfully, with no problem, walked up all 138 stairs, I'm proud to say. And some of the people from the ministry had a harder time than I did, but I won't name any names.
That tells that you're in tip-top shape.
I don't know about that, but and it was fascinating from a historical point of view, a scientific, a maritime point of view. It is sort of an icon of Guyana. It's actually not in what I would say horrible shape. I was pleasantly surprised that it was in better shape than I expected. Mm-hmm. So we'll be putting that application in. I think before the Jubilee celebration, we will probably know if we're successful or not. I don't think we would be able to do much work before the Jubilee celebration, unfortunately. Okay. But it is something that I think is worth preserving. It's the only lighthouse in Guyana. Lighthouses are disappearing throughout the world. There was originally on that site a lighthouse built by the Dutch, and then the British redid it. Mm-hmm. So, when I talked to Guyanese, I've been asking around, and you told me you think you last went when you're already a young woman, but you were a young school-age woman at the time. And it seems that the primary visitors over the years have often been the schools. And for a kid, I got to believe it's a wonderful experience, an incredible view of the city and the ocean and all that. So that's one. We are actually going to be submitting 2 projects this year. Mm-hmm. And it is possible. We have seen countries get 2 projects in a year, so I'm optimistic. And that we visited the clock tower at Starbrook Market, which any website you go to about Guyana, that's often the image that shows up. So clearly it's culturally and historically significant. It, like the lighthouse, was just a piece of genius mechanical work. The history behind it is incredible. And it, too, in my opinion, was not as in bad a shape as I might have expected it to be. So we're going to be submitting both those projects probably in the next 2 weeks, and hopefully in 3 or 4 months we'll have some good news. I will caution everyone that there's no guarantee either project will be approved. And if not, we may very well submit them again next year. So there's always another chance.
Okay, so these are things that you're really interested in if you have no problem with resubmitting again in the new year. So you did have a chance to go up at the Starbrook Clock.
I walked up all those stairs too. I did not count how many there were, but it was less than the lighthouse. I will tell you, I think the view actually from the clock tower was even better than the view from the lighthouse. It's not as tall, but the vantage point it had was very, very impressive.
Ambassador, there's lots of talk about what's happening this year for Guyana. I did mention earlier our 50th Independence Anniversary celebration, the big Jubilee. Are you looking forward to the experience and looking forward to seeing Guyanese, in a sense, reclaim some of their culture and some of the patriotism? Because there are many people, I'm one of those persons, who believe that throughout the years, we have somehow lost the sense of our culture and patriotism and so on. Are you looking forward to seeing all of this unfold before? No,
I'm looking forward, and so my wife and I both are looking forward to it. And I will tell you that I think it is a historic time to be in Guyana because it is the Jubilee year. I think the economy in the next few years are going to take off. There was a peaceful national elections and transition of power, and that's always a good thing because there were people who worried in the past about that happening in Guyana. So I think the local elections are going to occur before the Jubilee. That's a very important event. One of the things that shocked me when I was in Washington and heard that, what do you mean they haven't had local elections in more than 20 years? As an American, one of the larger and oldest democracies in the world, I could not, but how can you not have local elections? You have never voted in a local election because you clearly are not old enough to have done so. So all of that is history in the making. I think there's going to be a lot of Guyanese coming back who haven't been back in 10, 20, 30, even 40 years. And I think the recent efforts to clean up the city, my kudos to everyone involved with that, both from the city government and the national government and the private sector, because the city looks a lot nicer. So I think you're going to have a lot of Guyanese coming back and being very pleased. I'm told by the hotels that they're all booked solid,
Yes.
so it can't be bad for the economy if that's the case. So yes, I'm looking forward to. In fact, I'm not planning any leave the whole month of May. I want to be here the whole time.
Well, we're happy about that, and we'll be happy not only to have you, but to keep you here throughout that period.
It's also the 50th anniversary of U.S. Guyanese relations. The day Guyana got its independence, we began diplomatic relations that very day. So.
Okay, wonderful. You touched on the economy a bit, and many persons will agree with you that we feel that it will do, the amount of persons that we're going to have coming here, it will do wonders for our economy. In your estimation, is our economy in a bad state?
I would say no, considering that Guyana is basically a commodities-based economy. In other words, everything that you sell overseas comes out of the ground, whether it's gold, diamonds, bauxite, timber, sugar, rice, and the whole world that depends on commodities. Every economy is suffering very, very badly. So I guess there's been a slight downturn in Guyana's economy. Relatively speaking, I think this economy has weathered it better than others. And of course, you have the tremendous upside potential of a significant discovery of oil. Yes, oil is cheap right now, but if you're as old as I am, you know that oil won't be cheap forever. And it takes a number of years to get it out of the ground. So I think things are looking up overall for the Guyanese economy. There are tons of challenges here. The kilowatt hour cost for electricity is one of the highest in the region. So that's a challenge. There are a lot of infrastructure needs in terms of bridges, the port, roads. Liberalization of the telecommunications industry is another area I think that's very, very important. Things like that are still needed, but I think things are looking up. If I were a betting man, which I'm not because that's against the law,
yes,
I would be betting on Guyana's economy for the years to come. Now, I'm not talking about next month or next week, but in the medium to long term, I think it's a very favorable outlook.
All right, sir. I know I'm really enjoying my conversation with the U.S. Ambassador, but of course I have to let him get back to his busy schedule soon. But one of the things I want to ask you about, sir, is in a sense, democracy, and I have it jotted down here so I wouldn't forget. How close is Guyana and to some extent the rest of the Caribbean, to how close are we to achieving a democratic Caribbean and Western Hemisphere, and what are some of your recommendations?
Well, certainly I think Guyana is a very strong democracy within the Caribbean. We already talked about the national elections, which were both peaceful and there was a peaceful transition. The historic local elections will go a long way towards, I think, making Guyana a fully functioning democracy, and I think there's a challenge ahead for everyone involved, both private citizens, the government, the opposition, to figure out ways to empower people to have more say about their local government, which over time will allow them to have more say over national government. So there's work to be done there. I personally think that I'd like to see personally, and this is Guyana be a little more involved in in some of the things that go on at the UN and the OAS. Guyana has an incredibly strong commitment to democratic values, human rights, transparency, and such issues like that. And there are a number of countries, which I won't name, maybe in the region and certainly in the world, that are not necessarily big proponents of democratic values or respect for human rights or transparency. So I'd like to see Guyana take a little more leadership role in the Caribbean, in CARICOM and the OAS and the UN on such issues. That basically Guyana already supports all of those values and important things, but let's work together to try to make sure that the rest of the region is moving that way as well.
Ambassador, are there provisions for example, you did talk about the local government elections coming up. Are there provisions for your unit, your organization to be, in a sense, overseeing some of what happens?
No, we're certainly not overseeing anything at all. I mean, the support that we've been asked to provide, similar support to what we provided for the national elections. So for the national elections, we donated a fair amount of equipment. That equipment's still there, can be used for the local elections. If the government allows us to, we'll do like we've done, I think, in every election in Guyana, do some sort of observation efforts. But the election is for the government of Guyana and the people of Guyana to run and make it work or not work. But we'll certainly be watching with great interest because it is historic, and if there's any assistance we can provide, we will. We're getting pretty close to the date, so there's not a lot of new stuff anyone can do. I think we have some efforts going on to promoting youth participation in the elections. Again, we're not promoting a party, we're promoting a process.
Okay.
And we think it's important since youth have never voted in a local election, and Guyana is an incredibly young country, that the participation of youth, not only in going out to vote, but also in running for positions is very, very important. So we're doing a little outreach on that, but again, not supporting a party, just supporting the process.
All right. Finally, before I let you go, our current government has been really big on national unity and getting and stressing that Guyana is for all of us, all Guyanese and so on. On that note, I must ask, what is because you did talk about the transition, you had a very good relationship with the previous government, now you're having one with this government. What is your current relationship like with the current opposition?
Okay, well, I've only been here, on a personal level, I've only been here 4 months, and I did take some vacation at Christmas, but right before I went away at Christmas, I did meet with Mr. Jagdeo. I thought it was a very cordial and productive meeting. I hope it was the first of many meetings. I have met on a personal level at individual events with a number of people from the PPPC, and I look forward in the future to meeting in a more formal fashion with them. We've historically had a very good relationship with the previous opposition. I hope that, and my hope is it will continue to be a wonderful relationship with the current opposition. It's certainly my hope that anybody in any opposition party would, at least on policies and programs that are of great interest and value to the nation of Guyana as a whole, I hope everyone could get behind and support such things, while also at the same time serving as an honest democratic check and balance, as is part of any democracy. So there's always a role for opposition, but there's also a role for everyone getting together and governing for the good of all Guyanese. And we are big supporters of, I think the president talks about inclusion quite a bit.
Yes.
I regularly talk about a democratic, secure, and inclusive Guyana, because until you include all parts of your population, women, men, Indo, Afro, Indigenous, you name it, you're not using to the maximum extent possible all of your resources that are available. So I think as social inclusion is a wonderful subject, one that will help to push. It was hard reading about it in Washington to get a feel for it, but they're clearly, at least when it comes to politics, sometimes the lines are drawn. That's true in any country.
Yes.
You can watch the U.S. news and you'll see that's true in my country. But and I think especially during a campaign season, which we're having in the U.S., lines being drawn is necessary, and that's what politicians do during campaign. But hopefully, once the campaign is over and the elections are over, all politicians from all sides will come together and work for the betterment of the country. People ask me, why do you care if Guyana is democratic and secure and all that? And it's, we're all part of the same neighborhood. And, I'd much rather have neighbors that are safe and democratic and inclusive, because that's going to make, the dangers coming to my country much less. And it's the good human thing to do. So
Well said, Ambassador. Thank you so much for being here. Indeed, it was my pleasure. And of course, viewers, as you know, this ambassador will always be special because he's the first overseas ambassador we've had here on this program, Facing the Nation. Of course, if you've missed this conversation, you've missed a lot from the U.S. Ambassador to Guyana, His Excellency Perry Holloway. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you much. Go to the Embassy Facebook page, young people and old.
Yes, I will also plug that for him. Viewers, of course, this is Facing the Nation. I did promise you earlier to have two special guests. I've completed one. The second one is coming up soon, of course, as you know, and I've been promising you since last week to have the minister within the Ministry of Communities, and she's also responsible for the Housing Department, Minister Valerie Sharp Patterson. On the other side of the break, I'll be chatting with her. Stay tuned.